Hello. Hello, everybody. My name is Eden Marryshow, and I'm an actor in the National Black Theater's production of Hands Up. I am here with NSangou Njikam, the playwright of abortion. What's up, brother?
What's happening, my brother? Peace and blacknificence.
So let's get this started with what inspired you to write this piece.
Oh, man. Well, you know, I was sitting with Keith Josef Adkins. I wasn't sitting with him. I was watching everything that was going down post the killing of Mike Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And I sent a text message to Keith Josef Adkins of New Black Fest and was like, yo, we got to do something, like, this is crazy. And so he hit me back a few days later and he commissioned a bunch of us to write plays. And I was like, or to write these solo monologues, these testimonials. And I thought to myself, okay, I have a feeling that people are going to express their feelings, their thoughts and everything. Let me come at this a different way. Let me talk about what happens when people make a choice to do something, whether we agree with that choice or not. What happens if all of a sudden we have to deal with, like, oh, someone is going to take matters into their own hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted people to see that that doesn't necessarily come from a place of hate.
Yep.
It comes from a place of love. So I thought about this character Amin and created him to be such a loving father to be, or father would have been, and to understand all the love that he wants to give to his unborn son, and the challenges that come with that, but also to provide a solution. Hope it doesn't get to, but we understand that if it gets there, this would be why. That's why I wrote the piece.
And when, because that's what I mean. What I love about Amin is how much he's filled with love.
Yeah,
and how that throws somebody off. That throws usually somebody goes into a building and blows it up or does something that you're just like, oh my gosh, this person is a monster.
right.
But we get to see what led up to that. And then it really, I don't even know if we're allowed to, I'm not going to curse. I'm going to try my best not to curse. It really messes with your mind because you're like, no, this person's supposed to be a monster, but no, I've actually fallen in love with this person. This person is funny. This person's making Star Wars references. This person is, I could have rolled with this person when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And now he's going in here like bandaged up with dynamite, and he's a terrorist.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. That's why I'm glad you're playing the role, because, like, I know that you bring the love to it, you bring the funny to it, you bring the passion to it, but then the turn of, like, when it gets real. Because, you know, a lot of people, they talk real, but sometimes they don't know how to get real. And I was like, okay, what happens when it's like, yeah, I ain't talking no more? But it's like you said, from that place of love. And, you know, there's a code to this. And that is, it's you that's doing it, because I'm like, because usually I do it, you know that.
That skills terrified me. You want to bet, you know what I mean? You're one of the best, like, writers and actors of our generation, man. So that that really, I was like, what? That's what he does. I've seen you do it so many times. We've been on stage. I mean, I was doing a different piece, but
yeah,
on stage. I remember once we were both randomly in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah,
do you remember that?
Yes, I do. And so was Dennis Allen.
And so was Dennis Allen. And I was like, we were all three of us out there, and we were at what were we at?
We were at, like, Portland Center Stage or something like that.
Yes,
completely unrelated thing. And Red Door Project was doing Hands Up, and they flew Dennis out to do his piece. But then they were like, oh, we heard you were in town. Do you want to do your monologue from Hands Up? And it was just like, randomly, I had like 2 gigs at the same time. It
was so wild. Let me ask you a question about that. how different was the Portland audience from like the North Carolina audience or the Harlem audience?
Yeah. Well, what's crazy is like, I know we have a code as Black people that we talk in, where we're sending messages and references culturally, that I knew that the Portland audience, which was mostly older and white, they was like, maybe they won't get all of these, but they were totally in it, and they got the love. And then when the switch happened, they were like, oh,
I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember because I was in the audience. I wasn't like behind stage, like I had no role in it, and it was just like,
yeah, right. Everybody's
like sphincters tightened. Yeah, real tight, real tight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what was beautiful about that is because I remember, I was watching from afar, just watching people at the end, interacting with you and Dennis and the other members of the pieces, and they did seem right, because I always feel like there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. Yeah. And I feel like Black folks in film and a lot of theater, from growing up, it's been mostly about sympathy. It's been mostly about, okay, let me separate this thing. Oh man, I feel so bad for them. The 1,000,001 slave stories that we've had about slave folks. It's just always like, oh my God, I feel so sorry for them. Oh. The difference with your piece that's disconnected, the difference with your piece is, no, I'm making these Star Wars. I keep going back to Star Wars, but I'm making these Star Wars references. I'm talking about high school. I'm talking about falling in love with a girl. I'm talking about all of these like super American connective human things, to where I make you take your shoes off and put my shoes on. And then at the end, you're like, wait a minute. I have this dynamite strapped to me. I want to take these shoes. I don't know what to do. And that to me is empathy. That's the difference. You can walk away from something when you have sympathy from somebody. You can walk away from them. You can feel better about yourself that you helped this person, as opposed to being like, no, I'm part of the human race. This is what this might feel like. And that's like the beauty of theater. That's the beauty of ritual. That's the beauty of the ritual you created.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's part of what I feel like what we do in our storytelling. Our storytelling is actually meant to create this environment where you're participating in it, and your participation then automatically has you in the shoes of the performers. And then that means that as you're participating in it, and you start to realize, wait a minute, now I'm having the same emotional experiences as the performer. When you have a fourth wall, which, let me just say this for the record. So now I'm like, first of all, this fourth wall thing, I don't know why we keep believing it, because it's not really doing anything. Essentially, it's built for us to go, hey, don't talk to the audience. Don't get distracted by their responses. Or like for the audience to be like, don't run up on the stage and touch the act. You know what I mean? But like by now, it's kind of like, that fourth wall is a construct that we don't need, particularly us, because we know the importance of our reactions.
Yes.
We know that. That's why we say, you know what I'm saying? You feel me? You know what I mean? Like that's, all of these things are interconnected. So when you create that experience, it makes, and because we did, going back to when we did Game On at the community center, like way like them, and those are for kids, and them kids they were so happy.
What? And it was crazy too. I mean, the thing about like that piece also was that you and Lavonda and Goldie were playing like 12-year-olds. And those kids were with you every step of the way. And you couldn't tell them that y'all were not 12, 13, 14 years old. Right. Or maybe it was high school. No, I think I forget. But yeah, it's just like, but that speaks to that kind of like give and take. It's a completely different audience. And it also throws other like domesticated, for lack of a better word, audiences off. But it's like, you need to be quiet. Like, why are you making, why are you making all this noise? But there's nothing better than being in that audience, man, where people are talking, where people are talking back.
That's what freedom feels like. Like, who goes to a party and is just like,
yep.
And you're not saying anything. You're not like, that's a library. That's not a party. So, we know these things. And I think when people talk about, well, how is theater going to change? Part of it is that we start using our aesthetics. We start using our conventions. We start using our pillars of storytelling to build these new works. We don't have to use the Aristotelian structure if we don't want to. We don't have to use the things that we've learned from a Western theatrical paradigm if we don't want to. But that means we have to study our own. Most people are ready to sometimes throw away the Western part, but they don't study the parts that come from Africa and the rest of the diaspora. So that's when you go, okay, so then how does change happen if we don't know the other ways to do theater? But we know this because we all feel it. We all know how to get excited. We all go, ooh, don't do that. We yell at movies.
Yep.
And the movies can't hear us.
Yep. All the time, right? Don't do that. What are you doing? What is he doing?
That's what happened in Bruce in your film. Oh no, Bruce, no.
Yeah. I love stories like that though. When I remember I used to watch Different Strokes, and Arnold or Willis would do something, I couldn't even look at the screen. I would just be like, oh. But that's empathy, right? That's you feeling like it happens to you. Let me ask you a question about what do you think of one of the main differences in that structure of storytelling?
That probably one of the main differences is that it's birthed out of a need to transform people from one state to another. And so it's not just meant to think about a thing. It's meant to actually become active in the change. So when you're doing hip hop and people say, everybody say, ho, right. The call and response is to get you involved so that as things begin to turn, you turn with them. And then you feel change after you leave and you're ready to do something. The objective of African-based theater is to then go out and do. You've gone through it. You've experienced it. You've felt the highs and the lows and the mediums. And then you come to a place where you feel empowered. And it doesn't have to be. So there's a conversation nowadays about Afro-pessimism and Black fugitivity. But I'm going to add so Afro-pessimism is that you always have this idea that the supremacist system is with you no matter what. And the fugitivity is like creating a space that is joyful and happy and all of that. Well, I'm going to say for me, I move those two things out of the way. And I say, okay, when I look at what my ancestors do in telling stories, they tell stories to empower the group to do something different. And that was happening before there was a context of white supremacy, before there was a context of slavery or colonization. These were our traditions, and they have stayed intact both on the continent and throughout the diaspora for a long time. If we look at Grandmaster Flash, the Message, if we look at Nas, I Gave You Power, if we look at UNITY, if we look at A Different World or Spike Lee movies or, all of our stuff, the Chappelle Show, they Robert do Townsend. These Robert Townsend, Hollywood Shuffle, in Living Color, all of these things, they kind of do certain things and they're kind of they make you laugh, they make you engage, they make you think, and then they make you start behaving differently. And ultimately, I think that's what we find in our traditions. And that's why Black church is built a certain way. That's why the Nation of Islam and the 5 Percenters and the Moorish Science Temple and all of these different organizations that we've created do something very specific that is completely aesthetically different from other types of performance art that we see on the planet.
Was one of the million things that's interesting about that last about what you just said was you know, that it's about transformation.
Yeah.
I feel like all story is supposed to be about transformation, and I guess some ways of storytelling just lose their way.
Yes.
Like where it moves from this to this, and you can't change with this. You have a great discussion afterward for
Right.
2 hours over dinner and then go back to your regular life. But
Right.
yeah, there's something again, for lack of a better word, like there's something hypnotic about it.
Yes.
Where it's going from your conscious. Again, the lights are dark. It's as if you're sleeping while you're awake, and there's something about that form of storytelling that seeps into your unconscious. It's like everything that what theater is made for, it does that. So when you say transformation, I'm like, of course, that's what ritual is about. And I feel like it's one of the last rituals that we have.
No doubt. No doubt. I mean, you know, to your point, like, how many reports do you hear of people going to see Christmas Carol? Like rich people going to see Christmas Carol, and then they start like giving away more money. That means something, because that's the whole point of Christmas Carol, is to be more generous so that 3 ghosts don't show up on Christmas Eve and have to scare you. But how many, like, you'll see people who are rich, they'll go see Christmas Carol, they'll come out the theater and step right over a homeless person.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? And so what we know is that the formula of transformation is ineffective, right? Because we're not seeing the difference between the people experiencing the story and the behavior that they move forward with afterwards. And so does that mean the story of Christmas Carol is flawed? Not necessarily, but the way we're deploying it might be more for nostalgia's sake than for movement's sake. And I think you can actually have both. First of all, I would love to do a Kwanzaa thing, like, and just
let's do it.
I mean,
let's do it. Let's make that movie.
Listen, I got the treatment in the cut, so we can.
I bet
we can get busy. But you know, like, because I think holidays are also ritualistic.
Yeah.
You know, and there's things that there's stories that are connected to holidays that help to perpetuate that ritual, but they can get muffled. And I think that's what we are looking to do in theater, like you said, because we can actually make change. When people see Hands Up, they can be like, oh, I need to do something different. But also people could take the production and they just do it to just be like, this is how I'm feeling on the inside. And it doesn't lead to any change. It's kind of crazy that we're still doing Hands Up. I'm like, okay, cool, but I hope we get to a place where we don't have to do that no more. You know what I'm saying? I don't want you to not act. I'm just
no, man. I mean, I guess it kind of I found a picture that's about 20 years old of when went to a protest in Washington for Amadou Diallo.
Yep.
And I took a picture of I think it was like a 2-year-old in a carriage with a like a laminated note, and it basically said something to the effect, I can't remember exactly, just like, please, my life is important, don't shoot me.
Right.
And I looked at that picture and I was just like, if I told somebody this was from the last year's protest, they'd be like, yup.
So to that point though, how do we use our art to stop a cycle? Not just the theoretical part of it, but how do I, so my thing is, like, I use this when I sometimes joke about consciousness. Like, how does our consciousness stop the person from going into Popeye's chicken to get that 8-piece and make a different choice?
Make a different choice.
You know, like, so how do we, in your opinion, use this art to have us, at the very least, make a different choice?
One, it's so interesting, right? Because nobody listens to somebody preaching.
Right.
So it's that continued thing. I think it's such a great question. What do you do? I think you have to, in some ways, try to have two lives, exist inside the system, because the system right now, how it's constructed, I feel like allows certain stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about the idea of, it's this really great story the person wrote, and they were just like, why don't we get more into like the street element? You know, and a lot of the shows, again, that is an element, that's a part of everybody's culture. You know, everybody goes through that. But yeah, how do we change it? I think for me, so I made this film called Bruce.
Yep.
And
dope film.
I appreciate it. He's just an entitled American asshole.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of it is just like, we can be different colors, and that is welcoming. That is because again, we're not a monolith, right? We're all shapes and sizes, and one's not right and one's not wrong. So I think one way to help change is the understanding component of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you create something with the goal of somebody feeling like they're being, that I understand you, I think that's super helpful. Really, this is such a great question. I feel like I've thought about it often, but what is it? It's just telling a story. Oh, can we please have more fucking happy endings? Like, just, I rail about this a lot.
Yes, like, we both do.
Yeah, we do. I'm just, okay, I'll go on a mini rant here, and then we'll bring it back. But my issue is, for the last 75 years, at least in this country, the powers that be have not experienced real strife, real heartache. So the thing is, let's create art that just, maybe it means something, maybe it doesn't. Like, let's create something where the hero like destroys themselves. And going back to your original point, that is not really, to me, what stories are supposed to be about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like some people I know, their favorite movies are movies I watched one time, but I never want to see that again, ever in the history of my life. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, snap. Yeah.
Boomerang, I will watch that 300 times. I literally watch Boomerang every day of my 13th year on this planet. And there was something about seeing, in the summertime, something about seeing myself on screen, like doing something different with their life, that I was inspired. And it changed me, and it made me think about life in a different way. And I feel like that's what happy endings do. It doesn't have to be cheesy. And also, what's wrong with a little bit of cheese? Why is real life so hard?
You know, so you and I are of like minds, because also I think in all of our cartoons as kids, the heroes would win, even if they won in the next episode, you know? So like, we have an understanding at birth that we can overcome. We had the little engine that could, you know? Now it's like, if you were to have a little engine that could, it'd be like 100,000 memes about why the little engine can't, you know? Because there's this idea that victory is false. So I agree with you. I think also too, these stories where we have happy endings, they teach us how we can do it. So how can you change? Well, what you do is you create a character and you put them in a circumstance that mirrors something actually happening in real life. And you watch them overcome the circumstance. And when they successfully do it, you go, oh, that's one way. That's one way. Is it the only way? No, but it's one way. And that's one more option. Because to me, part of our freedom is having options. Now, the option in abortion is an option. It's one we don't like to talk about, but it's an option. Now, what you going to do with it? And I think that's what happy endings are, you know, is that here's an option. You can get with this or you can get with that. Yeah.
I think get with this.
Right.
I love how you like you said what I was like babbling on about. You said it in like 5 concise sentences. I appreciate that. Kind of the history of our relationship. Yeah, but I think that's such a great point, is the idea of options and the idea that yes, there are these happy endings, but these characters fail over and over and over again. And for me, one of the things that I want to do in my life is take the energy out of failure, because failure is really the only road to success. You have to fail. It's a learning experience. And I feel like we've been raised to not do that. Going back to abortion, and again, you creating that option is also a warning. Like this is an option for the universe, right? Like, okay, this is Malcolm X, right? We can go this route, which kind of pushes other people like, oh, let's maybe think about this a little bit. Nobody wants to go down that road. That's something else that I really appreciated about abortion. Do you have any stories where you feel like somebody came up to you after the show was over, or felt like they were changed, or something, a story that somebody told you in relation to abortion that kind of stuck with you?
I think a lot of people have such a good time in abortion that by the time they get to the end, they have a level of understanding of why these things happen. I think some people have come up to me and been scared, like, what you trying to say? And I'm like, well, it's not like we had Micah Johnson in Dallas, Texas, who shot at and killed police after Alton Sterling and Philando Castile were killed. He just had enough. What we understand, and I've said this, I think one of the biggest things of people coming up to me is at a talk back, I said one time, every living being has a defense mechanism, a way to protect itself. Venus flytraps, microorganisms, the daggone coronavirus is protecting itself by mutating. So every living thing does that. And it seems that we have an understanding of living things doing that, except when it comes to Black people. And we have been conditioned to not fight back because we think it automatically means death. And I'm like, says who? If grits and free breakfast programs was the greatest threat of internal security in terms of J. Edgar Hoover looking at the Black Panthers, and they are committing acts that attack Black people all the time, violent acts. They're not, it's hard to negotiate that. You can't be like, hey, police officer, can you see me as human? They ain't got no time for that. I think when we start to change and shift how we're functioning, folks change. It's one thing when you get bullied. It's another thing when you hit the bully in the mouth. It changes everything. And the stories that would come out of the talkbacks were stories of like, I get what you're saying even more now. And I hate to go down this route, but maybe we should think about it if the other routes don't work. Even the United States has a nuclear option. Like if we can negotiate it, if we can't do this through conventional means, we have atomic weapons.
Yeah. What do you... Yeah, I just you know where I'm at. What if you had to write abortion in 2021, how would it go?
It'd be the exact same one.
Mm-hmm.
It would be the exact same. I don't think there's any difference because the conditions haven't changed. You know, we protested a lot last year after George Floyd. One cop has been put in prison. People are still suffering. The system. So Neely Fuller Jr. said, until you understand white supremacy, what it is, how it functions, everything you try to understand will only confuse you. So I think that what the only shift I wouldn't make any more. I think Amin clearly understands what he's dealing with.
Without a doubt.
I think it's like, you know what? It's like playing Grand Theft Auto. You remember Grand Theft Auto San Andreas?
I had to stay away from video games, man, because it got
you. It was intense. But the whole thing about Grand Theft Auto is that your character, the algorithm was built where your character killed gang members, right? But if you kill police, the game would send swarms of cops to find you until they killed you, right? It very much mirrored how things actually go. So even in video games, people are telling you what it is. So that means you have to have an understanding of the game that you're playing. And then you have to start making a different set of choices. And maybe it's to not play the game at all. You know, like when we, you know, like maybe it's that, you know, like you said, I'm not playing this game anymore. These games are not conducive to my freedom, to my life, to my livelihood, to my family. Maybe I need to remove myself from the game altogether. Not necessarily by killing anybody, but maybe I need to live in the Caribbean. Maybe I need to live in Africa. Maybe I need to kill the internal white supremacists in myself.
That's the thing I feel like never really gets talked about.
Well, let's talk about it.
Yeah, and I feel like it's very much like another level out of the Matrix.
Yeah.
Yeah. So please talk, because you definitely talked about this before, but I want the people to hear.
Well, I think part of us making built in our aesthetic puts us in another matrix. So, you know, Sinking Ink is hip hop theater, but that's our aesthetic. So that means we can be in another matrix. The work that Universes does, that Tony Blackman has done, that Will Power has done, that Amiri Baraka has done, that has done, that Douglas Turner Ward has done. These are things that put us, the George C. Wolfe with colored music, they're built under a different matrix. And they allow us to have conversations about what we need to do in a way that we're talking in our languages, in our dialects. You know what I'm saying? So that's one way to do it. But we kind of like to have the conversation of, we built this country, this is ours, fight for it, fight for it, fight for it. And it reminds me of people who are in relationships and the person they're in a relationship with is consistently mistreating them. But you're going to fight for this relationship.
Yeah.
Even though they forced it on you, even though they've never acknowledged you as being equal to them. And most people would say, why don't you just get out the relationship? Because I fought for it. I've put in all these years. This is my relationships out there.
Yeah.
There, you know, goes to options. So to me, one way we can get free is to simulate freedom in our theater. That means that our stories are going to change. That means that they're going to maybe look more like our folk tales, where we watch our morals and ethics manifest. So maybe we create a story where I'm going to shout out Kristen Adele Calhoun, who often writes plays just on the other side of freedom, you know, about just, I repatriated to Ghana, everything's great. And my family doesn't understand why I did it. So the play is about understanding why I'm winning. And then everybody goes, oh, okay. All right, cool. Or maybe we just need to look at like what Infiniso is doing and what Ngozi Anyanwu is doing and what, you know, playwrights from the continent, first generation Africans are telling us in the stories. Because all of a sudden we'll start to go, let me start simulating what does Eden Marryshow look like not living in America? What does Eden Marryshow look like without the name Eden Marryshow? You know what I mean?
I thought about that this morning. It's funny you say that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because my great grandfather changed the spelling of my name, and we were just talking about, oh, would you ever change your name? We were talking about you actually. It's like, oh, would you ever? And so it's just interesting that yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, all good. But I mean, those are the things where, and we can do them in interesting and exciting ways. We can use our music, our dance, our movement, our poetry, our philosophies and cosmologies. You know, up in Williamstown, I just had my solo show, Freaky D Baby, and the whole thing was about freedom, but it was all through the premise of being a freak. You know, like freak. You know, but like you can use things and elevate them to such a level where you look divine on stage, and from your divinity, people feel free. And that's kind of what most spiritual stories do.
Yes.
But then that means that I'm not going to just tell I'm the traumatized person story all the time, or I'm the stuck person all the time.
Yes. Can you give me an alternative?
Yes.
You know? Can you give me, like you were saying, and I also just appreciate the reason like there are reasons for telling these stories. Have a reason to tell a story. And I just want to circle back to killing the white supremacist within.
Oh, right. We were talking about
what
that.
And what that means. Because I see that dude often.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
He's everywhere. Looking
everywhere.
You know, I want to say this because people often talk about steps. So I want to recommend some books that people can read that help to kill that white supremacist. I want to recommend Let the Circle Be Unbroken by Marimba Ani. I want to recommend The Psychology of Self-Defeat and Self-Hate by Amos Wilson. I want to recommend Aesthetic of the Cool by Robert Ferris Thompson. I want to recommend Blue Black Power, also by Amos Wilson. Afrocentricity by Malefi Asante. These are just some books to get people started and to have philosophies from which they can build not just art and stories, but different models for success and for freedom. Yeah.
I just want to say one thing I've noticed about you, and I've tried to incorporate into my own life, is there's stories that people tell us, and then we incorporate those stories and believe that actually that is the truth, and we continue to tell those stories with our actions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And to me, that's like being inside of the matrix. Like you're saying with the relationship part of it. It's just like, wait, hold up now. I even like recently am struggling with the word black. Because I'm just like, wait, hold on. Who made that word? We always go to the N word, but all the words. So I guess in a way, my kind of thinking also is, and what I see with you is, you choose to walk in the world in a specific way, and the world acts in kind. And for me, the difference is that you have a knowledge that you've worked on, that you've gotten from your family, that you kind of won the lottery, right? Like all of us don't win that lottery, and then some of us get the lottery ticket, but then wipe our ass with it. You know what I mean? But you've been somebody, I feel like, who has worked on himself and acquired a knowledge, and now the world has to act differently to you, if that makes sense.
Totally. And it's something, I often say, Eden, that you're one of the most positive people I know. And I apply that to how I walk. To embrace my African self is a positive choice. So I'm not angry. I'm honored that I know my ancestors are the Tikar of Cameroon and the Mende of Sierra Leone and the Kru of Liberia and the Balanta of Guinea-Bissau. I'm proud to and you never see me like, yeah, and if you don't know who you from, you ain't real. But
exactly, never.
It's to be the example, and then people, like you said, they see how everything shifts with that. So people go, it's great when people go, how do I say your name? Because that helps to kill that inner white supremacist. Or when I'm at a Nigerian restaurant having food or Senegalese food, or they're like, or I'm like, no, I've been to Africa. I'm trying to go more places in Africa than in Europe, or no, I'm learning to speak African languages, not European languages. Not because I'm like, oh, I'm killing the European, but like because African languages are so much like our slang that you just feel free when you speak it. And then it brings that positivity, that incentivizing of wanting to be who you truly are, and you talk about that. You talk about like, finding the passion, finding the positivity. Eden's favorite word, y'all, favorite phrase is let's get it.
Let's get it.
Let's get it. And it's like that energy is what I use in walking in this way. And so then I can make an portion that lives 99% in the positive and only turns once we get to the very, very end. And that means that people that start the monologue in the negative, you actually have to start in victory. You know what I mean? And that's something that, I've seen you come into rehearsals starting from a victorious place. Now, just imagine if we applied that. I start every day in victory and in a full knowledge of who I am culturally. That means that I don't have to use the English language. That means that I don't have to wear European clothes. That means my name doesn't have to be European. All these things, we have options. We are not stuck. And you talk about that from a universal perspective. And I'm talking about that from a universal perspective using an African lens. It's the same language, Thank goodness. Yeah. And that's why you did this monologue.
My man. Well, I guess we should probably wrap this up, man.
Yes, this was brought to you by Luster Care Products. Shea Moisture and Jollof Senegalese restaurant in Brooklyn.
I have to go there.
Yeah, man. It's in my neighborhood. Come on,
yeah,
bro.
I'm gonna come through. We'll go to I get back in September, so we can go then.
Okay, perfect. Because listen, we gotta get that Chebujen.
Let's get it. So NSangou, as always, thank you for being here. Thank you for writing Abortion. Thank you for being a beautiful spirit. Thank you for choosing to lead with joy.
And thank you for doing it, for taking it on. Like I said, I'm glad it's you, man. I'm glad it's you.
Well, I appreciate that, brother. And thank you for presenting the options.
Thank the ancestors for presenting the options.
Exactly. That's another thing that we can get to at a different time. Is just like
we'll have to go on Instagram or something.
Yeah. True. Yeah. So NSangou, thank you everyone out there for spending part of your day with us. I hope you continue to walk in the light. I hope you continue to investigate your life and investigate why you do things the way you do it, and take action. Let's get it.
Let's get it.
Let's get it.